Imagine coming home after 3 years away. You crossed an ocean twice. You survived a war, storms, pirates, all of it, just to get back to your family. And when you finally step onto that shore, everyone is gone. Your daughter, your granddaughter, every one of the 117 people you left behind. No bodies, no graves, no sign of a fight. The houses aren't burned, they've been carefully taken apart, piece by piece, like someone packed up and moved out. And on a wooden post, at eye level, someone carved a single word. CROATOAN. This is not a legend. This is August 1590, Roanoke Island. The man standing on that shore is Governor John White. And you already know this story, America's greatest unsolved mystery. 117 people vanished into thin air. But here's the question almost nobody asks. What if that word on the post wasn't a mystery at all? What if it was the answer, written in capital letters, in plain sight? And if the answer was right there, why did nobody go and check? Let's open the file. Wait, hit subscribe and smash that like button before we continue. First, the version you think you know. The story goes like this. In 1587, English colonists land on Roanoke Island off the coast of what's now North Carolina. Their governor sails home for supplies. When he returns, everyone has vanished without a trace. Some versions say the food was still warm on the tables. Over the centuries, that blank space filled up with monsters, a curse, swamp lights, alien abduction, a plague that turned the colonists into something else. One TV show literally made CROATOAN the name of a demon virus. That single carved word became horror shorthand. If you see it, run. And at the center of it all, a baby. Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America, White's own granddaughter, legend turned her into a ghostly white doe, wandering the island forever. 400 years of campfire stories, all hanging on one word and one empty village. Here's the problem. Almost none of that comes from 1590. The warm food? Invented. The curse? Invented. The horror? Invented, most of it centuries later. There is exactly one eyewitness account of what that empty village actually looked like. The journal of the man who found it. And his journal doesn't describe a horror scene at all. It describes something much stranger for a mystery story. It describes a message. Here's what John White actually wrote. Before he left for England in 1587, he and the colonists made a deal. If you have to move while I'm gone, carve your destination into a tree or a doorpost. And one more thing, a secret token. If you're in danger, carve a cross above the name. Remember that cross. On August 18, 1590, and hold that date, White's party rowed ashore. On a tree at the bank, they found 3 letters, CRO. At the abandoned settlement, on a post of the palisade, the full word CROATOAN, carved, in his words, in fair capital letters. And above it, nothing, no cross, no distress sign. White's reaction is the part the legend always skips. He wasn't horrified. He wrote that he greatly rejoiced because to him, that word wasn't a riddle. It was an address. CROATOAN was an island about 50 miles south, today's Hatteras Island, home of the CROATOAN people, the colony's closest allies. The reader man Theo has sailed to England with the colonists twice. If there was one place on this coast where 100 desperate English settlers could survive, it was CROATOAN, and the village matched the message. The houses hadn't been destroyed. They'd been taken down, dismantled, packed, carried away. No graves, no bones, no burned walls. Buried chests had been dug open and picked over, and White's own armor lay almost eaten through with rust. Whatever happened here had happened long ago, slowly and on purpose. So the plan was obvious. Sail 50 miles south tomorrow morning. That night, the weather turned. A storm came up, cables snapped, and the ships lost 3 of their 4 anchors. Supplies were running low. The crew, privateers, not rescuers, refused to risk the shore, and the wind shoved them out to sea. The captains promised to winter in the Caribbean and come back. Instead, the wind drove them east, all the way to the Azores, and then home to England. John White never covered those last 50 miles. He never saw America again. And now the question flips. Forget where the colonists went. Why did it take their governor 3 years to come back at all? White sailed for surprise in late August 1587, when his granddaughter was 9 days old. His timing was the worst in English history. In 1588, Spain launched the Armada, and England, bracing for invasion, banned ships from leaving port. Every hull was needed for war. White begged and got 2 small boats, which promptly got chased down and plundered by French pirates. He was wounded and limped back to England with nothing. By the time he finally crossed in 1590, it was as a passenger on a privateering run, with captains who cared about Spanish loot, not lost colonists. So the colonists weren't exactly abandoned by one man. They were abandoned by a war. 117 people waited 3 years on a thin sandbank for ships that never came. At some point, they stopped waiting and did the sensible thing. They moved and told us where. 400 years later, the ground started agreeing with them. On Hatteras Island, CROATOAN itself, archaeologists digging through native trash heaps have pulled out late 16th century English objects, part of a sword hilt, pieces of firearms, a slate writing tablet with its lead pencil, not the kind of trinkets you trade away, the kind of things you keep and lose where you live. 50 miles inland, at a spot called Site X, another team found English pottery of the exact type the colonists carried. And in 2012, researchers examining White's own hand-drawn map found a patch, a small paper repair, hiding a fort symbol at that very location, as if the plan to move inland had been drawn before anyone disappeared. Then there's a detail that should have closed the case centuries ago. In 1701, the explorer John Rawson visited Hatteras and met native families who told him their ancestors were white people who could, as they put it, talk in a book, read. Some of them, he noted, had gray eyes. None of this is a smoking gun on its own. Together, it points one way. The colonists didn't vanish, they merged. So if the answer was carved on a post in 1590, why have you grown up hearing a ghost story? Because of what the answer meant. Follow it to the end. English men, women, and children survived by joining a native community, marrying in, raising children, becoming, within a generation, indistinguishable from the people England called savages. To Elizabethan England, that story was not just embarrassing, it was unthinkable. Civilization wasn't supposed to dissolve into the wilderness. Easier to say the colony was lost. 2 centuries later, America needed the story too, but as a tragedy. Writers in the 1800s rebuilt Roanoke as a romantic legend, with Virginia Dare as its pale, doomed heroine, a founding myth swallowed by the dark forest. A colony that quietly became CROATOAN didn't fit that picture either. And when the legend needed fuel, fuel appeared. In 1937, carved stones began surfacing, supposedly messages from Virginia's own mother, telling of massacre and misery. 48 stones, almost all of them exposed as a hoax. Here's the pattern, and it's bigger than Roanoke. The mystery wasn't discovered, it was preferred. For 4 centuries, every generation looked at the same word on the same post and chose the version where it meant nothing. A glitch in history isn't always missing data. Sometimes the data is right there, carved in capital letters, and we just refuse to read it. One last time, go back to that deck. August 18th, 1590. The storm is rising, the anchors are gone, and John White is watching the coastline shrink, 50 miles from the place the post told him to go. Here's the date again, August 18th, his granddaughter's birthday. Virginia Dare turned 3 that very day, quite possibly alive, 50 miles south, growing up among the people who took her family in. White never made it back. His last known letter, written years later from Ireland, hands the colonists over, in his words, to the merciful help of the Almighty. He died not knowing. But maybe the record knew all along, not lost, moved, waiting, absorbed, and then written out of the story, because the ghost was easier to live with than the answer. The greatest missing persons case in American history may simply be a case nobody closed, a file that sat open for 400 years with the answer carved on the very first page. History has glitches. We find them. File closed on Roanoke. Next time, we open a file on an invisible killer. In the 1300s, the Black Death wiped out up to half of Europe, tens of millions dead in just a few years, in a world of sailing ships and walking pace. So what happens if the same disease breaks out tomorrow in a world of 8 billion people and international airports? That's next on Glitch Files. File closed. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.